I had the brilliant idea of mixing guns with magic in Avowed, and it works exceptionally well. Let's say it's a bit too good even, and you can do all of this right at the beginning of this game. So let's go over why you want to make a mage not just specialized in magic, no, but also in guns in the game. Let's call this the GUNMAGE build that will blow your mind. Also thanks to Xbox for providing me a key. See, the guns in Avowed, the one-handed pistol and the two-handed Arquebus, have insane raw damage and burst. The highest in the game, practically at the trade-off of slow as reload, because otherwise they would be insanely broken, of course. But with a little bit of magic, literally and figuratively, we can negate that trade-off. We utilize two loadouts here. The first loadout is a pistol with a grimoire, and that's where the magic comes into play, and the second is solely for the two-handed Arquebus. Basically, you use magic to set up insane AoE damage and CC, and you then accordingly use your guns for disgusting single target damage and stuns to blow your enemies to smithereens, and set up for those beautiful cinema shots nukings. However, you need some good guns and some good spells to do that. And I have good news for you though. Stay tuned for a little bit. But before we continue, I have to thank Mandragora for sponsoring today's video. What's a Mandragora, I hear you asking? Well, Mandragora is an upcoming game which is a dark fantasy action RPG that blends skill-based combat, deep character customization, and Metroidvania-style exploration in a beautifully hand-painted world. Players will battle terrifying enemies, unlock powerful abilities, and shape their journey through a rich narrative filled with peril and discovery. And while you face Souls-like challenges, you have all the tools to build your character per what strategy or loadout you like the most, as there is a vast arsenal of weapons, armor, items, and spells to choose from, and you get a nice epic audio experience while we're at it. Mandragora is in fact an upcoming game that's launching on the 17th of April 2025, and I'm here to inform you a bit in advance so you don't miss out on this exciting game. What a service, right? And everyone who pre-orders the game will receive exclusive digital rewards, as well as access to 2 preview builds of the game ahead of the release so they can play immediately. Claim your destiny, pre-order Mandragora today, and prepare for battle using my link in the bio. In the very first main zone of Avowed, we can already get a unique pistol that is goated. Yes, in the very first zone of the game, believe it or not, you have to go to this little island here. The bounty mission revolving around Tempestuous Luendi sends you here actually, if you take it in the main city in the first zone, so make sure to pick that up for some extra gold. However, what is even better is the pistol that you can get here, Kaerok's Pride. A unique high damage pistol that applies shock to your enemies but also deals extra shock damage. And this is definitely unique because the normal weapons of the game do not have these type of extra benefits. No, they're just standard damage, but these unique type of weapons give you extra juicy abilities. It gets better though, because since this weapon isn't unique, we can in fact enchant it back at the camp. Go to the camp and enchant it with Wrath of the Storm. See, this little thing here makes our gun magical, because it will proc a spell called Crackling Bolt, and this is actually a really good spell. It bounces from enemy to enemy and deals great damage in the process of doing so, and accumulates even more shock, in addition to the shock accumulation of our gun's shock damage. So our one-handed gun here is getting magical influences for the better. Now for our Arquebus here, which if you don't know what that means is a musket type of gun, and if you don't know what that means, well, it's a long-ass gun that was used in medieval times, and in this game it absolutely blows everything to indiscernible atomic residues, especially if you go for those juicy headshots, and you can do that from across the map basically. So this Arquebus type of weapon again is really good. Bad news, however, you can't get a unique in the first zone. That's at least what I think, because I didn't find one. You just gotta go buy a regular one, preferably a fine one, as a fine one will do more damage than a common one. Makes sense, right? However, good news here to eliminate the bad news right off the bat is that you can get a nice unique one once you get to the second main zone. Make sure to do the Resolve Steel quest in the second zone, and you can start that by starting the Terrence Bounty quest, which will take you all the way to here, and you will be rewarded accordingly at the end of this quest with a gun called One Last Rig. Now, One Last Rig will not just hit your primary target, no, it will let those big boy bullets ricochet to an additional target, and you can enchant it to hit 2 additional targets even. So pretty good when you're considering how much damage this thing can deal. Make sure to upgrade your guns accordingly to the highest enemy levels in the zone you're in, so it's mostly fine for the first zone, exceptional for the second zone, and so forth, to make sure your damage stays on par with your enemies. If you see skulls next to your enemy's HP bar, they're going to be stronger than you, and most of of the time wreck you. However, with this build and this GUNMAGE build, you will still be able to take them on all the time pretty much. You just have to play it a bit more as strategic. With guns covered, the idea here is that we then use our Arquebus as much as possible from a distance or up front, since it's the highest damage dealer in our loadouts here, and our pistol as well. And the idea is then to swap between these two guns to essentially reduce the downtime of them reloading. And we also prioritize using the pistol when we're in addition planning on using casting spells and trying to get as much crackling bolt procs as possible to synergize with our spells. I hear you asking, what spells do we use though? And honestly, there are no bad spells in this game from my experience. Pretty much every spell you can use is good and has its use cases. So this is going to be completely up to your own preference. There's no min-maxing here, but I would recommend you to at least use one frost spell, at least one fire spell, and at least one shock spell, and most of these spells will be in an AoE capacity. So prio AoE spells here, as your single target damage is already insane thanks to your guns. For example, Fireball that you can unlock as early as level 5, which will do really good raw burst AoE damage, combined with Blizzard, which is great CC and damage and sets up very well for your weapons, and then also Crackling Bolt or any other lightning spell, as these lightning spells tend to have really good AoE damage. And I'm not just talking about the damage itself, but basically the way in how this damage is inflicted upon your enemies, as the lightning basically zaps from one target to another target and has really good coverage on the battlefield. And we get at least a spell from every element here to accumulate all the elemental status effects tied to these elements, like Frost, Ignite, and Shock, as combining them then accordingly will melt your enemies and give you really good control in combat. A really good combo here, to visualize this for you, is for example, freeze your enemies with your spells and then accordingly blow them up with your gun, as when your enemy is frozen, you get the opportunity to essentially shatter them for insane damage and you can one-shot them accordingly. And that's especially the case when you're using your pistol or Arquebus, which already comes with really high base damage, so the combo will naturally be extra good here. It is amplified destruction, you get the point. You use spells for AoE and CC and setting up for your guns, and you use your guns for single target annihilation. It is a great combination, if I may say so myself. Aside from the offensive spells, I would highly recommend you to also run some defensive spells like Arcane Veil, for example, which can in fact bounce back arrows shot at you, which is especially nice early on when you're very squishy. Also Bristling Frost, which is a frost aura that accumulates frost on anything that touches you. So you can already passively set up for those juicy freeze shatter combos without doing anything really. And the defensive spells like Arcane Veil and Bristling Frost give you damage reduction as well, and you can use both of them at the same time. In the case of Arcane Veil, it's actually very noticeable with a whopping 50% damage reduction. So at the very least, I would always recommend to run the spell in any setup, as you don't want to wear heavy armor as a caster or ranger type of build in this game, in my opinion, due to the penalties to stamina and essence, and your defensive spells here are really good for compensating for that anyways. Early on, and especially if you're playing on higher difficulties, I would recommend to use Parasitic Staff for essence management as well as Corrosive Siphon for health management. You can actually get both of these spells very early on from a unique grimoire that you can buy at the vendor, which is called the Beathel's Grimoire. Corrosive Siphon can give you all your health back, so it's really good for sustain and weaving in between everything that is happening on screen, and Parasitic Staff helps extremely well with getting essence back, to the point that if you kill one mob with the spell, you can already have a full essence bar, which is of course nice because going forward you can accordingly blow up everything again with your main spells. And your main spells is then what I would recommend you to have in your grimoire, as you get them all for free essentially, with extra benefits from casting them from your grimoire, like ability cost and cooldown reduction. And you then only have to spend 1 point per spell to get their rank 2 benefits. The Greater Elements Grimoire is a really good early on pickup, as it gives you access to 3 big AoE spells from the 3 different elemental schools and a great defensive spell on top of that. For attributes, from my experience, you want to kind of focus on dexterity, as it makes you operate a lot more smoothly in terms of reloading your guns, swapping between your loadouts, and just moving and dodging in general. Perception is also really good, as you want to stack crit with this build, as it synergizes well with your gunshots and spells as well. But even Might is also good here, it's just extra damage, and Intellect and Constitution is also really good. The only one you don't really need for this build is Resolve. And regarding the other 5 mentioned, well, you really can't go wrong with any of these, to be honest, but I would prio Dexterity and Perception the most, and then accordingly get also some points in the other stats. Do not neglect those. In the 3, it is kind of flexible what you want, and their specking is cheap and easy. You can do it at all times and at any location, so I honestly would just try out different stuff instead of following a set of points if I was you. For your very first level 1 spell, however, for this build in particular, I like Charge the most from the fighter section, as it provides some something we don't have yet, and that's this insane mobility spell that can either get you quickly to a target of interest, like say a summoner that is hiding behind his minions like a scaredy kitten, or to reposition yourself to get a better angle to shoot or cast spells from, as ultimately this is definitely a build that utilizes range very well. So we have to keep that in mind. I would also recommend getting constant recovery, by the way. Insane perk for sustain, it can recover a lot of your HP passively and is also in the fighter section. However, keeping the flexibility a bit in mind, I will also say that there are some really good must-haves, and they are mostly in the ranger section over the wizard section, as most spells are already really good in their base form, especially when cast from your grimoire without the need of spending more points in them. Must-haves though are definitely going to be steady aim, which will allow you to freeze time mid-combat. It is extremely useful for both offensive and defensive purposes, as you can also chain it with a nice dodge, for example. 2 points at the very least here in my opinion. Marksmanship, again, at least 2 to 3 points, just a percentage based damage increase, it's good. Quick switch, 2 out of 2 points is very important for this build. The moment you unlock this ability is a moment of celebration. It makes things so smooth. It's going to make swapping between loadouts very fast and gives you the ability to reload your guns while they're in the inactive loadout automatically. So going forward, you don't have to go through the reload animations anymore, which is huge, as you can swap between guns now and shoot back to back basically. It's really good. For higher levels, definitely get staggering shot 3 out of 3, as the faster you can fully stun an enemy, the juicier your damage will get, as you can accordingly get a lot more cinema shots, which deal an insane amount of damage. Also, Flurry of Blows as an ultimate skill is really good too. When you get to it, grab it. Crit Chance and Sniper are also worth mentioning in the Ranger section. Both synergize very well with this build and something to aim for when you have your bases covered. In the Wizard section, the absolute must-have is going to be the Grimoire Mastery point, as it unlocks more spells and makes them more efficient. I would also get at least 2 ranks in Bristling Frost as well as Arcane Veil, 2 ranks at the very least for the arrow deflection. The rest of the points can be comfortably spread on your favorite spells to enhance them. Then one more important thing to mention is your companions. Who do you take with you on your adventure and, you know, have a good time? You don't want to have anyone that kills your vibes completely. So I say I would go with the Kai for his stunting abilities and taking aggro off you, and Gyatta for the healing, shields and utility. For Kai, most notable is his fire and ice ability with pure lead and quick reload to make it extra good, and Leap of Daring is a good second active as well. And then I would say get Second Wind as well, as he will die quite often due to his frontliner type of skill set, or maybe he's just not that smart. Either way, Second Wind for this guy comes in clutch a lot of the times, so get it. For Gyatta, you want to get Purification and make it as good as possible with the boosted Essence and Essence Pressure perks in my opinion. Barrier is also really good here, by the way, as those shields give you a lot of protection, so I would get that next up. And then Reconstriction as a passive, and now you know how to play a GUNMAGE in Avowed to great success in all of this really early on in your adventure. So if you just picked up this game or are planning on picking it up when it releases in a few days, well, you can right away try out this build. Have fun and let me know what you think in the comments. And don't forget to pre-order Mandragora with my link in the description. Check it out.